Good morning, I'm Claire Murphy. Welcome to the Solo Bureau. This past week or so, we have heard a heck of a lot about Pauline Hanson and One Nation. About Hanson's trip to Europe, her podcast chat with that right-wing guy, her appearance at a Conservative conference where she told the crowd not to be ashamed of being white, her MP Barnaby Joyce, while trying to defend his leader for the things she's been saying lately, ending up making headlines for shouting at his dog. Then Pauline is back in Australia, this time defending herself against accusations that she supports the White Australia policy, despite telling that same far-right guy that the country had essentially gone wrong since the day it was abolished. Is this all a strategy to grab the attention of a certain voter? Or are we watching One Nation derail before our eyes? That's coming up. But let's get this underway, shall we? Here's what's been happening while you were sleeping. It's Wednesday, July 22. Prosecutors have told a London court that former UK Government Minister Anne Widdecombe was killed by a man who struck her on the head with a hammer 21 times. The 78-year-old was a prominent figure in Nigel Farage's Populist Reform UK party, but was no longer a member of Parliament. She was found on the floor of her kitchen on July 9 when her personal assistant asked a gardener to check on her after she failed to appear for a live TV interview that morning. Prosecutor Kashif Malik explained that a camera inside Widdecombe's home had captured the attack, explaining the footage shows a man that they believe to be Joshua Carey, a 28-year-old from Northern England, enter the home where Widdecombe was eating lunch and ask her, "Don't suppose you have bank cards and ID?" In the 2 minutes that followed, he allegedly hit her with the hammer, then tipped her from her chair onto the floor before taking her wallet and leaving. Carey has been charged with murder. He was not asked to enter a plea. Police have said they believe Widdecombe was targeted, although the motive remains unclear. The investigation is continuing. An interim report into the death of Kumanjayi little baby in Alice Springs earlier this year has found child protection authorities missed multiple issues. According to documents from cases raised over the 5-year-old's family situation, the presence of domestic violence was noted in every referral the department received. However, they never conducted a domestic and family violence risk assessment. The report found Kumanjayi little baby's mother was left to protect her children on her own while experiencing domestic violence herself. The body of Kumanjayi little baby was found 5 days after she was allegedly abducted from Alice Springs Old Timers Camp. Jefferson Lewis, a man unknown to her, has been charged with her murder and is awaiting trial. The US has bombed Iran's south and west after President Donald Trump claimed Tehran would pay dearly for the deaths of American soldiers. Iran has in return targeted US sites in Bahrain, Kuwait and Jordan and a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis have now also sent an email to companies who load or unload cargo at Saudi ports, threatening to impose a naval blockade and opening up a potential new front in the war. This may raise the threat to global energy supplies and trade beyond the Gulf region. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong has met with her Laos counterpart to demand answers over the deaths of 2 teenagers. 19-year-olds Holly Morton-Bowles and Bianca Jones died from suspected methanol poisoning from tainted shots that they took at a backpackers hostel in Vang Vieng in November 2024. Lao officials recently claimed they did not have enough evidence to lay charges, so autopsies on the 2 young women were not carried out. Officials have reportedly tested the Tiger vodka consumed and found it contained higher than permitted levels of methanol. The substance was also found in the bloodstream of both women when they were moved to Thailand for treatment. Foreign Minister Penny Wong met with the Lao Foreign Minister while attending a conference in the Philippines, expressing Australia's anger that serious charges were not pursued, saying in a statement, "I made clear that Australia expects the Lao government to ensure this investigation fully reflects the seriousness of this tragedy and that those responsible are held properly to account." Victorian teachers are set to strike this week after the union rejected the government's updated offer of a 28.3% pay rise over the next 4 years. Members had been pushing for a 35% pay rise over 4 years after rejecting an initial offer of an 18.5% increase over 3 years. Deputy Premier and Education Minister Ben Carroll said this latest outcome was disappointing, saying this deal would have made Victorian teachers and education support staff the best paid in the country, together together with the best conditions. He's urging teachers to reconsider the strike planned for this coming Thursday, saying students should be in classrooms and parents shouldn't be left scrambling for childcare or losing a day's pay. Former AFL player Tony Modra has posted for the first time since an accident saw him rushed to hospital in a critical condition last month. The 57-year-old was driving south of Adelaide on June 18 when a falling tree branch pierced the windscreen of the cattle truck he was driving, sending him crashing into a tree. He posted yesterday that the SA Ambulance Service, South Coast District Hospital and Flinders Medical Centre had saved his life and put him back together with a few titanium plates. He explained that he was getting out and about a bit now and slowly catching up on everything he'd missed in the past month, saying he felt humbled to learn how many people were cheering his medical team and family on, saying he'll never be able to thank everyone enough. He posted a picture of his family embracing him while he was in hospital, and then one of them all together and smiling outside. Those are your top stories today, folks. On the way next, between Pauline's trip to the UK and Barnaby Joyce's Doggy Day interview, what's really behind this latest One Nation PR push? And how do we see it for what it truly is? Last week, One Nation leader Pauline Hanson went to London. She spent a bit of her time chatting to Tommy Robinson, the far-right activist that Karl Stefanovic interviewed on his podcast and who ultimately ended Stefanovic's career at Channel 9. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, is an anti-Islam activist, co-founder of the English Defence League. He has an extensive criminal record for assault, fraud, public order offences, and has done several stints behind bars. But what he also did was he mentioned Pauline Hanson in that interview with Karl Stefanovic, so she jetted over to the UK to find out what that was all about. When she was asked by Robinson on his podcast how Australia had ended up with Pakistanis, Somalis and Africans, she said it started in 1973 when former Prime Minister Gough Whitlam opened up and got rid of the White Australia policy. Now, the White Australia policy, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, was a set of laws that attempted to keep Australia a predominantly white British colony, restricting migration from anywhere that didn't fit that description. The policy was wound down after World War II and then removed entirely by Whitlam in 1973. Miss Hanson then went on to appear at a conference back in Australia on Tuesday where she defended her comments to the room in Perth.
I was telling him when it changed.
Yeah.
So I've never advocated, thank you. I have never advocated for the White Australia policy. You've got to call out the elephant in the room. And I'm sorry to say this, but I don't want people coming to this country from radical Islamic countries. I don't want that here. I want to protect the Australian people.
Meanwhile, Barnaby Joyce, One Nation's first MP in the House of Representatives after quitting as a National Party member in 2025, has been fielding questions in response to the comments made by his new party leader. One interview going viral this week after he yelled at his dog mid-live TV chat.
You're defending your leader, but are you really comfortable with where she is taking you?
I think... Sit down! Sorry. It's a dog.
After that interaction, he also got into an argument with Sarah Henderson, the journalist who's interviewing Mr. Joyce there for the ABC 7:30 program. Now, after he mentioned his dog again instead of answering a question, she asked him to focus, where he told her not to be rude, otherwise he would end the interview. From the outside, this seems like a train slowly derailing under the pressure of polling increased expectations and a new place cemented in a more consistent spotlight. But is it a more intentional move to generate enough PR to get seats won despite not having the policy or even the costings of promises to back it all up yet? Mark Kenny is the host of the Democracy Sausage with Mark Kenny podcast. He's also the director of the Centre of Australian Studies Institute at ANU. Mark, welcome back to the Solo Bureau.
Great pleasure, Claire.
All right, I want to ask you about the One Nation PR campaign that we are currently witnessing happen across the country right now. We've seen Pauline Hanson do her little tour of the UK. We've seen her on Tommy Robinson's podcast. She spoke at a Conservative conference. Barnaby Joyce has been doing a lot of interviews. He quite famously this week yelled at his dog, which has made headlines everywhere. It feels like the One Nation PR strategy right now is working because we're talking about them. They're making headlines daily, where we used to see a spike in headlines and then they would sort of fade away for a bit and then spike again when something else controversial was said. Is this intentional, you think, or is this just good luck for One Nation right now for being top of the headlines?
Look, it's pretty hard to get inside the head of James Ashby and the sort of One Nation Brains Trust, but I think it's safe to say that there is a modus operandi here, which we can see in a number of different places where the sort of fringe right or the populist right is ascendant. And it does seem to conform to a similar kind of set of dynamics. Now, whether that is causative or not, that is a bit more difficult to say. For example, there's an obvious relationship between a new arrival coming onto the scene, growing in support, therefore attracting more attention. If they are a fringe party, they continue to say things that are, unorthodox and attention grabbing. This then becomes part of a cycle. Whether the attention itself is the object is harder to definitively say, but my guess is that this is the approach that they have adopted for a quite solid reason, and that is that it seems to be working. That is, when the sort of institutional mainstream is outraged by some inflammatory commentary on immigration or transgender issue or something like that, the attention that the small party gets only builds their profile and sort of builds their notoriety amongst voters who aren't otherwise paying much attention, and it does them good. It's almost as if the the controversy is the product. It is the object of the exercise, and so saying inflammatory things, kind of works at both levels.
Can they essentially say whatever they want at this moment? We saw Barnaby Joyce asked about not being able to cost any of the potential promises that they are making, and he kind of said, well, they want us to act like a major party, but we're not. We don't have the resources in order to cost anything. So, and even with Pauline Hanson this week, when she told Tommy Robinson that, essentially immigration has gone wrong ever since the White Australia policy ended, and yet in Perth this week she defended that and said she's not a supporter of the White Australia policy. Can they essentially just kind of say whatever they want at this point?
I think they can, but it's a question of what the overall or the longer term objective is. If the longer term objective is this, kind of holy grail of achieving widespread majority support and thus being able to form a government and making, amazingly, someone like Pauline Hanson Prime Minister, having never run much more than a fish shop from what I can tell, but certainly never having sat around a cabinet table or been a minister or balanced a budget or any of those things, and to go from that to being Prime Minister is pretty much unthinkable and certainly unprecedented in Australian politics. But if the objective is to do that, then a lot of this controversy farming that they are involved in at the moment will become problematic increasingly as you get closer to an election. If the index of success is becoming influential in the polls, establishing a profile, attracting a lot of voters and therefore a lot of funds and donors and so forth, then I guess it works. I just think that buried in Barnaby Joyce's rationale there that you described, where he talks about not being a major party, buried in that is a recognition that if they were to become a major party, they couldn't sort of operate in the way that they're operating. They'd need to become much more responsible. I think also just on that, there is a recognition, I think, whether it's in Pauline Hanson's mind or not, or maybe it's in James Ashby's mind, her chief advisor, but there's a recognition that they needed to get more structure, more sort of orthodoxy in, at least in their sort of policy, those policies that they do intend to put forward and the debates that they do intend to participate in. And that may be a significant part of the attracting Barnaby Joyce, because unorthodox as he is within the mainstream, he's unorthodox in the One Nation orbit because he's mainstream, because he comes from the mainstream. He's a former deputy prime minister, leader of a mainstream party in the coalition, a former experienced minister. Yes, he's kind of unpredictable and idiosyncratic compared to a lot of politicians. But compared to One Nation, he's positively straight-laced. So I suspect that they needed and wanted to import in Barnaby Joyce's experience, and it probably has been behind some of their thinking that has led to Pauline Hanson doing the National Press Club and them talking about having a bigger suite of policies. But there are limits to what they can do if they're going to operate as they are at the moment, being mainly an attention-grabbing operation.
On that, Barnaby Joyce being somewhat straight-laced from a One Nation perspective, what's the future for him? Because he seems like he's spending a lot of his time defending his leader at this moment in time and not doing that easily from what I can see. So he got into a bit of a stoush with Sarah Ferguson on 7:30, over her trying to ask him if he felt comfortable or uncomfortable with the things that Pauline Hanson is saying. Is there a future for Barnaby Joyce in this role, considering where he's come from?
That's a good question. Time will tell on that. I agree with you. I think it's implicit in your question that there's a sense about Barnaby Joyce that he looks like he's fraying at the edges, that he's being stretched between 2 points that is making him very, very uncomfortable, and that is what he's on the record as having stood for a now 22-year-old parliamentary life, and what Pauline Hanson is sort of extemporising about at will as she communes with far-right thugs in the UK and speaks of loving the idea of mass deportations and various other things. I mean, he's having to sort of clean it up, and most media in the press gallery and so forth have Barnaby's phone number and have talked to him before over a number of years, and so there's a sort of an incredulity, I think, that creeps into the line of questioning that they will be putting to Barnaby Joyce in terms of the difference between where he was and where he stands now. And you can see it in his behaviour. He is trying to sometimes clean up, mop up, as some people say, what Pauline Hanson has said, and often adding better kind of excuses for it than Pauline Hanson is capable of herself. But it's taking its toll on him. And that interview with Sarah Ferguson was, in the parlance of these things, a train wreck. I mean, he looked absolutely kind of on the edge of losing control, really. Screaming at the dog and arguing and refusing to answer a question that Sarah was asking until such time as he had a chance to answer the previous question. And then when he did that, there was very little in the previous answer that he gave. And, the whole thing was very fraught. And he did look like someone who is close to his wit's end in the whole process. But then again, going back to the first question, we're all talking about it. And so perhaps that's just another performative thing in the way that they are operating, that, to take on the mainstream media, be seen to be at your wit's end with the mainstream media's petty preoccupations. And some of your One Nation supporters will only like you more for it. So, who knows what's real and what's theatre, what's substance and what's campaign strategy. It's a bit hard to tell at the moment.
Well, we have seen whatever this strategy is convert into actual seats in parliaments around the country at this point. There is a by-election happening in WA, which will be done at the end of next month. And as far as campaigning goes, opposition leader Basil Zempilas, who we might remember a couple of elections ago, the Liberals were all but wiped out from the West Australian Parliament. They have returned a little in the previous election, but not as much as they would like, obviously. And so Basil Zempilas is talking about potentially teaming up with One Nation preference-wise in this by-election, and that could get them over the line if you look at where polling numbers are right now, which is a very different conversation than, say, Angus Taylor, the federal leader of the Liberals, has been having about Pauline Hanson lately, when he has basically said, we will not get into bed with One Nation. Does this make the Liberals look worse in that between state and federal they're having very different conversations about this?
I think it probably does. I think it probably even has tensions within WA. If you think about the most muscular opponent within the coalition against One Nation, it is Andrew Hastie, who, of course, is a WA federal member of parliament and a frontbencher in Angus Taylor's team. Indeed, he's the deputy leader of the opposition in the House of Representatives. Now, he's talked about going to war with One Nation and takes it very personally as they are attacking him. And he's very much kind of calling bluff on the lack of substance that One Nation's putting forward. And you have the state Liberal leader, a guy from the media, a former sports commentator with a high profile, talking about reaching some sort of accommodation with One Nation. I mean, one can understand within the context of a by-election the kind of strategy that's being played here. They're trying to maximise the non-Labor vote, land a blow on the government, and therefore cement, secure his position. We all know that opposition leader is a very difficult job. It's an unstable job, part of the precariat really, and Zemplis probably is looking to have a win. And if he can have a win where either the Liberal candidate or the One Nation candidate gets up with the others' preferences in a Labor seat, then they'll try and take that as a victory. I can understand that, but it's a very difficult dance to be getting, doing deals with One Nation and essentially suggesting to voters that, you sort of fellow travellers, it's all much of a muchness whether you go with the Libs or One Nation. I think that's quite a dangerous place to be. That's certainly what Hastie thinks, and there are a lot of people in the Liberal Federal Party who think that too.
Mark, thank you so much again for sharing your insights with us. We will wait and see on August 29 how that works out for those in WA.
Thank you, Claire. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for your ear lend today, team. Thank you to those who are sending through story ideas too. I'm chasing a few at the moment, so keep them coming in. You can drop me a message on Instagram, and a congratulations to Louise, who I believe messaged someone for the very first time on Instagram this week, and she messaged the Solo Bureau. Well done. You can also hit me up on Substack too. Have a chat while we're there. Tell me what's going on in your life and in your neighbourhood. Otherwise, have a fantastic day. I'll catch you here tomorrow.